Hey, Grand Ascension. Greetings, everyone. It's me, Nisi Denise, better known as Baby Girl Slaughter, Carolyn Denise. I'm back to do another reading. Let's get into it. All right. I have crossed the Antarctica. If you remember, a couple of days ago on Saturday, I read to you the ending of one of Claudio's books. And we started this one, I have crossed the Antarctica. The one that I read to you, the most recent one, I believe, and don't get me wrong on that one, the land of the custodians, right? I read to you that and I finished up that book. And so now we're going to deep dive into this one. The first two chapters, if you recall, of this book, was a gentleman that got on a ship and he was describing the sights, the sounds, the water, meeting, observing the passengers. And as he took a walk along the deck of the ship, he ran into a mysterious woman. And he also has been on many different ships or voyages. This was in the early 1900s. And he realized that the ship was altering its course. And so did some of the other passengers. He also noticed that the crew was methodically working, quiet, observant of everyone, but not very talkative or communicative. So we're going to get into chapter 3, or actually chapter 4. I'm sorry. So we read 1 through 3. And let me just really quick. Chapter 1, he talked about the harbor. All right. If you recall that. Chapter 2, chapter 1 and 2, he talked about the harbor and the woman the woman that was not from nowhere, that he met, the mysterious woman. And then 3, the uncharted course. And now 4, since they're on the move and they're pushing along and they're seeing icebergs and they're trying to navigate through that course, right? There is a sinking on chapter 4, and that's where we're getting into. It's a ship. And I showed you this before, but I'm going to show it to you again. Okay. So if you just want to sit back and relax, work, fall asleep, or just listen to me read, please do so. All right. It says, it was a deep shudder, as though the ship had scraped against a surface far larger than itself. There was no explosion, no dramatic burst of sound, only a heavy vibration that traveled through the entire structure from the keel up to the masts. For a brief second, there were no screams, only that unnatural movement, low and immense, running through wood and steel alike. The cold that night would not be the worst of it. Something far darker had begun. I felt the railing beneath my hands tremble with an intensity I had never experienced before. Ice floes adrift nearby, yet none seemed to have struck us directly. There had been no visible frontal collision. The seconds slowed. The deck tilted almost imperceptibly at first, but enough for dread to settle in my chest. I lost sight of the woman in the confusion, and in truth, I lost sight of everything. In that moment, all I wanted was proof that the engines were still pushing us forward, that the ship remained in control. Then came a second sound, a metallic this time, rising from somewhere deep within the hull. It was not a crack in the usual sense. It was a long, sustained tearing noise, as if something inside the vessel had begun to open. I did not want to accept what my instincts were already telling me, but there was no escaping it. We were taking on water. Okay. And I was thinking that they were going to happen upon a ship that was taking on water. It's actually them that's taking on water. And more than likely they hit an iceberg, right? So it says, the first cries rose from the below decks. They were not yet screams of panic, but confused shouts echoing upward. Water! Water! Someone yelled, it's coming in! I ran towards the stairway leading down to the intermediate levels, but 2 sailors blocked the way, their faces drained of calm. They ordered me back to the deck. When I demanded to know what was happening, they did not explain, only repeated the command more urgently, back to the deck. Around us, Cabin doors were flung open as passengers emerged to confront the terrible realization that we were sinking in freezing waters and doing so gradually enough for fear to mature into certainty. The incline increased slightly, just enough to unbalance those who had not yet embraced themselves. The wind strengthened as if summoned by the disaster itself. For a fleeting moment, my mind betrayed me. I closed my eyes and saw my parents, warm memories intruding absurdly upon the chaos. When I opened them again, the nightmare was fully awake. I pushed through the growing crowd and spotted her at a distance. It's that woman. Mm-hmm. She stood near the railing, not staring at the ship, but at the horizon beyond it. There was no visible panic in her posture. Did you know this would happen? I shouted. Did you know this would happen? For the first time, something like sorrow crossed her face. No, she said quietly. This was not meant to happen. Another violent tremor tore through the structure. This time, it was unmistakable. A brutal internal rupture, followed by the roar of water forcing its way inside. The lights failed almost instantly. Darkness swallowed the deck, and even the stars seemed to vanish beneath the thickening clouds. Now the screams multiplied. Officers shouted overlapping orders. Children crying. People surged towards the lifeboats. Far too few for the number of souls on board. The ship was no longer merely leaking, it was surrendering. From the lower openings, I saw dark mass of water rising, mixed with cold vapor, far faster than any surface scrape against ice could justify. Somewhere nearby, a woman cried out to God with a desperation that cut through the storm. An officer shouted for order, for people not to jump, but order had already dissolved. There were not enough boats. There would never be enough boats. The angle grew sharper. One lifeboat was lowered before it was properly secured and fell crookedly into the sea, sending several passengers directly into the freezing water. I saw them disappear almost instantly, swallow black waves that pierced like needles into the flesh. The storm, which had been building in silence, erupted in full force. The sky closed above us like iron. Everything seemed aligned against survival. Now, can you imagine just closing your eyes and seeing these dark clouds coming in? It's lightning. You see a ship stuck halfway out of the water, people jumping over into the icy water, screaming, children and women, people scrambling to get to the boats, to get to the life preservers and shouting at each other. It's chaotic, right? So then it says, I lost sight of the woman in the turmoil. I attempted to reach my cabin to retrieve a heavier coat, but the lower quarters were already flooding. Water crept along the passageways with terrible certainty. I returned to the deck. The ship no longer felt solid beneath my feet. It felt fragile, almost paper thin against the violence of the sea. A final impact, far stronger than the rest, reverberated across the structure. One of the funnels tilted, the bow dipped sharply, far too sharply. I ran toward the opposite side and noticed a lifeboat tangled in ropes, suspended awkwardly and nearly overlooked. I shouted for those nearby, women and children still struggling for footing on the slick deck. A man tried to climb aboard, though there was barely space. An officer hesitated, then another pushed him aside. It pushed him inside, and the boat dropped hard into the below water. I had only seconds to process the scene when I felt a sudden, forceful shove behind. I did not even have time to grasp the railing. My body went over, falling toward the freezing sea. I closed my eyes, bracing for the shock of the water, but instead I crashed into wood. I had fallen into a small lifeboat already adrift. I had no idea how it had positioned itself beneath me, nor why it was empty. There was no time to question it. The storm raging, the vessel groaned in its final moments, and I began rowing with every remaining ounce of strength. From a distance, I watched the enormous dark hull rise into an impossible angle. Silhouettes of people clung to its upper edges, scrambling upward in a futile a futile instinct. Then, without explosion or spectacle, the ship broke. It did not detonate. It just simply split, as though something unseen had drawn a line through it. The stern lifted for several endless seconds before slipping beneath the surface. The ocean crossed over it with deafening violence. A brief vacuum hung in the air, followed by the roar of collapsing water. I kept rowing, though I do not remember feeling my arms. I remember only the question repeating in my mind, was I alive? There's a picture of him. He ended up in a boat by himself. I mean, there's got to be people in the water. Did he not pick up anybody in the boat? Let's keep reading to find out. A massive wave hurled my lifeboat sideways, as though driven not only by the sinking, but by some deeper current beneath it. I cannot confirm what it was, perhaps a vortex, perhaps something else, but the force was undeniable. The cries from other boats faded quickly into darkness. And my husband's coming in here, you guys.
And they said, no, please don't jump, don't jump.
I'm going to flip the camera so everybody can see how crazy he is, right? He just had to come in here. So it says, perhaps a vortex, perhaps something else, but the force was undeniable. The cries from the other boats faded quickly into the darkness. I saw no one I could reach. No lights, no signals, only black water and wind. After the frantic effort to distance myself from the wreck, another thought emerged, persistent and unwelcome. Who had pushed me? The force at my back had been deliberate. It did not feel accidental. So he's saying someone pushed him over the edge to the boat. I refused to believe that survival had come to me through a coincidence alone. Rain struck like projectiles. The wind howled across empty water. And yet, amid the devastation, I was alive. A towering wave lifted the lifeboat once more and drove it into a direction I had not intended. I tried to correct the course, but the current overpowered me. It felt purposeful, as though the sea itself had chosen my path. Eventually, exhaustion replaced resistance. I lay back against the wood, alone, adrift in a black ocean, beneath a starless sky. The echo of the sinking still ringing in my mind. How much pain can a body endure? I asked myself again and again. How much pain can a body endure? The storm raged for hours. Cold seeped into my bones. My hands barely responded. Yet the current never abandoned me. It carried me relentlessly onward. When the storm finally weakened and I lifted my head, I saw it in the distance, a white line stretching the horizon. Not scattered fragments, not floating debris, a continuous wall. A vast, gleaming barrier of ice. And this is what he saw. I don't know. I'd be freaking out. I would just be, I would have come unglued. As you guys know, I can't swim. I can't swim. Not in this avatar body, not in this life. I need to learn. My brother threw me in, I don't know, Derry. You probably say something when you see this video. I want to say it was either 15 to 20 feet of water. We were up on a diving board. I was on his back. I jumped in. I was comfortable being on his back. I was young. He told me, I'm going to take you up. I'm going to push you off the diving board. I want you to hold your breath, kick your feet, and I'm coming in behind you, right? I'm like, no. I got down. I didn't want to do it. I went up 3 times. The third time, well, you know what? He pushed me off. I went straight to the bottom. I don't remember anything else except when I woke up, I felt this burning sensation in my chest and I was coughing up water. And there were people standing around me and a lifeguard and my brother and some grown-ups. And yeah, we left the pool. That's all I remember. And then I went into the University of Louisville, went to the deep edge there. And I don't know how deep those pools are, 35 feet, 20 feet, something like that. And I'd walk around it, but I would always go in the shallow end. And I was learning how to swim at one time. I actually had swimming pools. We've had swimming pools, but I can tread water a little bit, but I'm not one to like swim. I need to learn how to, right? Because when I was learning to to do my pilot's license, of course, I would have to learn how to swim if I had to ditch the plane in the water, but I did not continue. So anyway, a little bit about me. So it's one thing that I want to learn how to do in this avatar before I exit, right? Is to learn how to swim and swim good, be a great swimmer. I've had people try to teach me. Two of my sisters were lifeguards, Tammy and Simone. I've had my children try to teach me. All of my children can swim. Devin swims better underwater than on top. But I'm just like, I'll get in and I'll go up to water up to my nose. I'm 5'5". So I'll go up to like 5.5 feet of water, where I'm bobbling, quite possibly almost 6 feet when I can do this. And I've been on the ocean way, way out there and, fish swimming around me, but I'm always on ground or sand or, I can feel the bottom. So yeah, it's just a little bit about me. So anyway, let's get into chapter 5, the continuous ice barrier. Because again, this is what he's seeing. And we know he was pushed into the boat, right? He was pushed intentionally. All right. So let's get into it. So it says, Dawn brought no relief. Not even the thought that my life had been miraculously spared only hours earlier could lift the weight pressing on my chest. How many had been left behind? Okay. So consciously he's going over in his head, agony. Why was he chosen and all these other people were left? The question tried to surface, but my body and mind had entered a state of pure survival, blocking memory as a defense against the collapse. When the storm finally subsided, the sea fell into an unsettling silence, as though nothing catastrophic had occurred. Long, heavy swells still rolled beneath the lifeboat, but the sky slowly cleared into a pale, frigid brightness. With the chaos gone, a new question emerged with greater force. Why had the ship taken that course, and where had they intended to bring us? I opened my eyes with difficulty. My clothes were soaked, stiff with salt. My hands were numb, every muscle aching as though bruised from within. The lifeboat floated precariously, held upright by what felt like the physics and more like the sea's indifference. I drifted parallel to what appeared to be an immense barrier of ice, imposing and absolute. It rose from the ocean like a wall dividing itself. The formation stretched endlessly in both directions. A continuous expanse of white lifting vertically from the water. Smooth and sheer in some areas, perhaps 300 feet high, fractured and jagged in others, where darker recesses drew my attention. I tried to sit upright, but my legs barely responded. Clinging to the edge of the boat, I forced my eyes to focus. The wall extended across the horizon in both directions. The first thought that crossed my mind was simple: Antarctica. But reason resisted the conclusion. We could not have sailed that far south. I searched for the sun, and I'm trying to determine if its position, but the light felt different, subtly altered in a way I could not articulate, yet unmistakably so. Without warning, a stronger current began to guide the lifeboat toward the barrier, steadily, as if drawn by an unseen magnet. I attempted to resist with the small oars, but the effort was futile. The force was too violent. It was constant, patient, and my exhausted body had no strength left to struggle. As I approached, I noticed irregularities along the surface. The wall was not uniform. It is darker in sections, interrupted the whiteness. Recesses and shadows formed deep indentations, and under and beneath certain areas, I glimpsed hollowed spaces shaped almost like domes of intense blue ice. Among these distortions, I discerned what appeared to be a vertical cut, a narrow passage, cleaving the barrier like a scar deliberately carved into it. Panic rose in my throat, yet beneath the fear, it was something more primitive, a necessity. I had no potable water, no food, no strength to remain adrift indefinitely. The wall represented danger, yes, but it also represented something other than endless ocean. I had no choice but to surrender to the current pulling me toward that strange opening. Look, this is what he's seeing, and I would say go for it. They would have you to believe that you can't survive without food and water for a long period of time. And I'm going to tell you that, again, we're being affected by a parasitic race or parasitic beings or entities. It is on record and it is a factual thing. And that's why I'm going to be talking about it down the road about breatharianism. First, stopping the meat, right? Slowly phasing off of certain foods, and then slowly taking in more breath work and restructuring your body, right? And then getting to a point to where you don't eat. I'm just telling you. So it says, that's a little bit about breatharianism. So let's get back to this. But what I'm saying is you can survive if you train your body, and you have to. You can, okay? And I know people are going to say, oh, this is BS, but I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just telling you that it is possible, okay? So it says the lifeboat aligned slowly with the passage. It was narrow enough that the ice on the other side seemed nearly close enough to touch. As I entered, I noticed beneath portions of the ice what looked like submerged structures, dark, almost metallic forms embedded within, as though something artificial had once been swallowed and preserved there. Hey. The temperature dropped sharply inside the corridor. I held my breath as the boat advanced towards the frozen walls. I did not know which frightened me more, the open sea behind me or the narrowing ice closing in from both sides. For several long minutes, the only sound was the faint friction of water against ice. There was no wind within the channel. There were no birds, no life, silence, just the water. Okay. Then, without gradual transition, the space opened. The lifeboat emerged from the passage, and an entirely different landscape revealed itself before me. I blinked repeatedly, convinced that exhaustion had finally overtaken my reason. The current shifted. The atmosphere itself felt altered. The sea was no longer dark or violent. The water appeared clearer, calmer, almost motionless. The wind had vanished. The sky bore a different hue, brighter and purer. I turned slowly. The ice barrier now stood behind me. On the opposite side, ahead, there was no ice at all. In the distance rising from the horizon, I saw what appeared to be an island covered in unfamiliar vegetation. I continued drifting under extreme fatigue. Hours may have passed. I cannot be certain. My body surrendered repeatedly, and I slipped into an unconsciousness more than once. Dehydration clouded my thoughts. Eventually, the lifeboat struck something solid, jolting me awake. Land. I found myself before a shoreline, dense with vegetation, and my heart pounded with disbelief and relief intertwined. I had been certain I was dead. Shades of green spread across the landscape, trees, shadows, gentle elevations breaking the line of the coast. How could such an island exist behind a wall of ice? This is what he saw when he was going through the cave or the tunnel. Okay. So this is what he saw, and he was coming through, and he was thinking he was having an illusion, right? He lost consciousness. And so when he woke up, he was like, yeah, I'm dreaming. How could such an island exist behind a wall of ice? The current seemed to know the way. The boat advanced slowly until it touched the sand. With what little strength remained, I dragged myself from the vessel and pulled it further onto the damp shore, fearing the sea might reclaim it. My legs gave way as I knelt on the warm sand, breathing unevenly. Even the sound of the ocean here felt different, or perhaps my mind could no longer distinguish one reality from another. I rose unsteadily and moved toward the vegetation. The ground was firm and real. Each step was an effort against exhaustion. I did not recognize the flora, nor the trees, nor could I be certain the air itself was safe to breathe, yet what choice did I have? I found small red fruits growing on a low plant. After only a moment's hesitation, I ate them. The flower was intense. It was sweet, unexpectedly fresh. Unsure whether they were poisonous, I sat and waited for a reaction. Leaning against the trunk of a massive tree whose roots gripped the earth with ancestral strength, I allowed the exhaustion to claim me once more. For the first time since the sinking, the sound surrounding me was not chaos. It was absolute stillness. I lost all sense of time. When I awoke, it was not to wind or waves, but to something foreign to the forest. Voices, distant, melodic, unlike any language I recognized. I forced myself upright and moved cautiously through the vegetation. Though so weak, I felt marginally restored. The fruits, I assumed, had helped. As the forest opened into a wide clearing, I saw something impossible. At the heart of the distant woodland, beyond the barrier of ice I had crossed, rose what could only be described as a city. White towers ascended with flawless geometry. Broad pathways cut through the expanse. Structures reflected light with a purity that I felt almost artificial. And figures, strange figures, moved along the edges of those paths before slipping silently into the deeper forest. The world I had known fractured completely in that moment, or perhaps I had already died, and this was some domain beyond my death. My mind, burdened my exhaustion, and shock could no longer trust its conclusions. Where am I? I whispered aloud. The most unsettling aspect was not the city itself, it was the growing certainty that I had not arrived there by accident. And this is what he saw. He's really tripping. I would be too. Chapter 6, The Eyes That Do Not Blink. This is scary. It took several long minutes to accept that what I was seeing was not a hallucination. The clearing stretched before me, dissolving into something that defied explanation. Beyond the forest edge stood a city like anything I had ever witnessed in England or in any industrial port I had known. Who had concealed such a place within the world? Why? The white towers were not built of common stone or no classical marble. At least they did not appear to be. Their surfaces reflected light in a way that felt almost organic. There was no smoke from these chimneys, no suspended cables, no carriages, no anchored vessels along the visible shore. A profound silence reigned, broken only by faint harmonic voices drifting in the distance. Figures moved along the wide pathways crossing the expanse. At first glance, they might have been ordinary people, yet something about their movement unsettled me deeply. They walked in measured lines, following routes that seemed to know intimately. I remained hidden among the brush, breathing shallowly. Salt still hardened my clothing. My body ached with fatigue, yet the sight before me prevented rest. I gathered a few more of the nearby fruits, hoping to recover strength. One of the walkers stopped. He did not search the surroundings for the source of the sound. Instead, he turned his head directly toward the exact place where I stood concealed. His eyes glowed, and this is what he saw. Check it out. His eyes glowed. The light seemed to originate from within the iris itself, an intense uniform green. I blinked rapidly, assuming once more that exhaustion was deceiving me. He did not react with alarm. He did not run or shout. He simply observed. Two others joined him. Their eyes shone differently, one with subtle reddish hue, the other blue, but all shared the same internal luminosity. As I stepped closer, I noticed their faces were partially concealed by dark masks, their bodies similarly covered. A chill ran across my arms as I approached. My first instinct was to retreat into the forest, but survival left me few alternatives. I forced myself forward, stepping partially out of the vegetation, raising my hands to indicate I meant no harm. My ship sank, I said, my voice dry and strained. I need help. They showed no sign of understanding. The three figures exchanged glances through the communication did not appear purely gestural. It was as if it was an invisible signal moved between them. I noticed large packs resting against their backs. Then one emitted a sound, a controlled harmonic tone. Another responded with a deeper vibration. It was communication, but not one I could decipher. A faint pressure built at my temples, not painful, yet distinctively unnatural. I instinctively lifted my hand to my head. What are you doing? I murmured. The first figure stepped forward slowly. I retreated back by reflex, but there was no aggression in the movement, only examination. I felt without unsettling clarity that something within me was being studied. They were scanning him, as though they were searching for a signal, a coherence, a resonance I did not myself comprehend, and yet there was no true exchange possible between us. Finally, without theatrical gesture or spoken word, the three moved aside from a path leading toward the city. They did not escort me. They did not follow. They simply cleared the way. I understood the gesture. I gathered once more at the forest behind me, dark, unknown, silent. I glanced, once more at the forest behind me, dark and an unknown, silent. There were no real alternatives. I stepped forward. The ground beneath my feet was firm and unnaturally smooth. As I approached the towers, the architectural details became clearer. Surfaces flowed in the continuous curves, merging seamlessly into the precise angles. There were no conventional windows, only translucent openings that seemed to emit light from within. More figures appeared along the pathways. They observed me without interrupting their pace. As I drew nearer, they too shifted subtly aside, allowing passage. It was as if they had been expecting me. For the first time since the wreck, I felt with certainty that the sinking of the ship had not been merely a maritime accident. I had crossed a boundary, and something beyond the boundary had allowed me to enter. Okay? Yeah. So, I've read to you guys chapters 5 and 6. Okay. And then we're going to get into chapter 7. And then that's where I'm going to leave you. Okay. So this is called The Inner Gate. All right. And let me put my mark here to 8. All right. Let's get into it. And this is him walking. So I'm going to show you a picture. Now, mind you, what he's been through with the ship sinking and nearly, unconscious and scared. How many days was he adrift before he got to this place? Who knows? We're just reading and he's just recalling all these things and we're living it with him, right? Through his eyes. So he says, I walked for what felt like an eternity. With each step, the city gained clarity. The white towers were not merely vertical structures, but organic architectural bodies, interconnected by elevated bridges and corridors that seemed suspended without visible support. There were no thick columns, no exposed beams. Everything flowed in structural continuity that defied the construction principles I had known. The damp scent of the forest had vanished. though perhaps the salt and the sea embedded in my clothes were too strong for me to perceive anything else. I heard no engines, no gestures, no machinery, yet the city clearly functioned. The question rose with growing intensity. How? There was an undeniable order to the layout. The principal towers rose at the center, while lower structures formed a precise perimeter around them. Between these buildings stretched perfectly maintained gardens. I saw no one tending them, no tools, no visible caretakers, and yet nothing was neglected. Parts of the intersection remained obscured by a different structure, something I could not fully discern from where I stood. What prevented me from seeing further was a wall. It was gray and white in tone and surrounded the central cluster of towers with impeccable geometric precision. And this is what he was looking at. Check this out. Beautiful. Look at that. He's walking up there. I think my mouth would be like, it bore no battlements, no classical defensive turrets, no signs of medieval fortification. It was a continuous vertical surface of considerable height, seamless and deliberate, with a single visible opening in the distance, a doorway large enough to dwarf any ordinary entrance. A chill moved through me. This wall was intentional, architectural. It did not defend against storms or tides, it guarded something. As I approached, the faint pressure inside my head returned slightly stronger than before. It was not an attack, but it felt like constant evaluation, a silent scanning. I wondered whether my arrival had been detected long before I reached the island itself. When I stood before the gate, I saw that it was neither wood nor conventional metal. It appeared to be made of the same material as the towers, though denser. Its surface marked by subtle linear patterns, forming designs I could not decipher. My perception faltered again. Fatigue blurred the edges of my reality. I paused in absolute silence. This was not the immediate fear of drowning or freezing that I had felt upon the ocean. It was something more primitive, the awareness of standing entirely outside this known world. I placed my hand against the surface of the door. It was warm. Not cold like ice, not hot like sun-exposed metal, warm as if it internally regulated. In that instant, the door opened. It did not crack or swing. It simply divided into two panels that slid apart with almost imperceptible smoothness. On the other side stood a figure that forced me to lift my gaze. He was far taller than the beings I had encountered outside, nearly 10 feet tall. His body was covered by a robe of deep orange that fell with a geometric precision to the ground. His face was uncovered. His skin possessed a slightly different tone, paler, almost translucent beneath the light. His eyes did not glow like those of the others, but they were profoundly deep. He studied me in silence for several seconds. This gaze was different, not the distant assessment of the walkers. This was conscious, analytical, and intentional. At last he spoke. His voice was deep and measured with an unusual cadence. The English he used was structurally correct, yet the intonation felt studied, as though each word had been learned through a logic rather than a habit. You do not belong to this territory. Relief flooded me at the sound of a language I could understand. My ship sank. I answered quickly, nearly desperate. I don't know where I am. We departed for America, towards South America, and yet I arrived here. What is this place? He observed me carefully before replying. You are in the Kether? I frowned. Kether? What country is that? I paused, followed, brief, almost imperceptible. There were no countries here. There are no countries here. There are no countries here. There was no mockery in his tone, no instruction. It was simply a statement. This accumulated exhaustion, hunger, and disbelief merged into a dizziness. I struggled to stay steady. I need water, food, I murmured, my voice losing strength. He inclined his head slightly as though assessing my condition beyond that what was visible. And this is what I'm seeing on the page. This is Kether. So he went through the passageway and ended up right here, outside the ice walls. Your organism is in severe depletion. Without immediate stabilization, it will collapse. I did not fully understand the word stabilization, but I grasped the meaning. He stepped aside. Enter. It was not a gentle invitation. It was a direct instruction. I crossed the threshold. The moment I passed through the gate, the pressure on my head vanished entirely. The air inside the wall felt even purer. The temperature remained stable. The ground beneath my feet was subtly different, smoother, more refined. The door closed behind me without sound. And for the first time since I had glanced the city, I understood that the island was not merely an unknown land. There was an entire system operating here, and I had just entered into its core without yet realizing it. And again, this is where he is. All right. We've read 3 chapters. And actually, we've read 2 chapters. 5, 6, 7. When did we read? So when I started, how hard did I? Well, we read a lot. We read like 4 chapters, 4 through 7. Yeah, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And when I come back, we're going to read chapter 8. And this is, I believe, how you pronounce it, Kaluzika. Kaluzika. And so we'll read 8, maybe 9, and let's see how many chapters we got. Y'all know I love to read. I could sit here and read this whole book to y'all right now. I don't want to make the videos too long because I don't want to lose people, but we've got 12 chapters. And when we come back, we'll do 8. So you know what? Next, when we come back, we're going to finish this bad boy. We may finish it today, maybe this afternoon if I feel like reading to you guys later. We'll come back and read the last 4 chapters. Okay, so I was reading from Claudio Nocelli's. I have crossed Antarctica and found lands beyond the ice walls. Okay, it's by Nos Confundrum. Shout out to Mr. Claudio Nocelli. I believe he is in Argentina. I appreciate you all for joining me. Thank you so much for letting me read to you. When I come back, we'll finish the book. We'll be reading chapters 8 through 12. And at some point, we're going to get deep dive into the Fiat people and the Reset Wars as well. So, as you guys know, I received another book yesterday from Mr. Claudio's collection from Amazon. We will intervene. I am ready to get into this book as well, right? I think from his collection, after we read that book, and just briefly, We Will Intervene. But there is a book that I have not read to you guys, which is Terra Infinita, The Detail of the Worlds and the Theory of the Other Domes. I have read to you all this one, and I have highlighted and flagged this bad boy up. So I'm thinking this is the first or the second book he did, or third, and this came much later, right? But I want to peruse through that with you all so we can kind of get a good idea of what's in store for us there. And we have read I'm trying to think, is there any book that I have not read to you guys? By far, I think this was one of my second favorite ones, The Post-Resettlement. And he has a couple of audio books out that you can get on Audible, I think, or Kindle. Okay. They're not in print. The last time that I checked, they weren't. So there are a couple of those audiobooks out there that I have listened to that are pretty good. Okay. I highly recommend those to add to your collection, right? But we have pretty much covered all of his material except for what I was showing you here, with these two books. So this one, the Terra Infinita, and the We Will Intervene. The We Will Intervene book is the one that I really want to get into. So that's why we're going to finish up these last 4 chapters in the next day or two. Okay. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you guys have an amazing day. And remember what I always say, you be the change that you want to see all around this earth dome, because it's up to you and I to make that positive change. Breath is life. Hawa. And we need to remember that the kingdom of heaven is within us, the neshama. And we are energy beings, light bodies, consciousness in these avatar or physical bodies having this experience, right? And so we need to remember those things, right? We need to know that we are more than just what we see, right? I am more than what you see on camera, and so are you. So I hope you have an amazing day.